अस्सलाम वालेकुम दोस्तों, उम्मीद है कि आप सब सही होंगे। आज का एपिसोड यानी हम बात करेंगे फ़लस्तीन में जो इज़राइली हरकतें हैं, जनीन के अंदर जो कुछ हो रहा है, उस मौजू पे बात करेंगे। और joining us actually from Israel is Israeli journalist, and he's a dear friend as well. I should say former journalist, because you left journalism some time ago, but you're
Years
still
ago.
quite active, Asaf, aren't you?
I'm active. I'm tweeting as long as Elon allows us to continue tweeting without limits. I'm still tweeting about what's happening here, but I left
Tell
journalism.
us, tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, Asaf, before we continue into what's been happening in the occupied territories.
Okay. I was born here in Jerusalem. Grew up in Jerusalem until I was 20 something. Left to Tel Aviv, and then in the past 10 years I've been living in Jaffa with my family, my partner and two children. I was a journalist for 15 years or so, working for Haaretz newspaper in Israel, which is I think the most prestigious newspaper left here, if any. Different positions. I was world news editor for about 6 years, and then I moved to the science department. I was a science correspondent, and I left about 2 years ago, quite noisily, I must say. It was during one of the previous escalations here in the area. It started with attacks on Gaza and from Gaza, and then things escalated inside the Green Line in mixed cities with Jewish and Palestinian population, including in Jaffa. And I was there watching in front of my eyes how things deteriorated, and how there was like looked like a joint attack by the Zionist police and the right-wing mobs against the Palestinian population in the mixed cities, and where I was living in Jaffa, and against my friends and my children's friends. And I was trying to convince my editors at Haaretz, who's supposed to be the left-wing newspaper, to report about what's happening, and they refused. So I quit, which is kind of unique in Israel, because usually Haaretz is being considered very left-wing, and I left Haaretz because it wasn't left-wing enough for me, which makes me, I guess, a bit odd in the general population here. Kind of a
So tell
people.
us about that. How does that make you different? Because you're in the minority, essentially.
Yeah, I think that things you need to understand about Israel is after 70 more years of oppressing Palestinians, the country started with ethnic cleansing of hundreds of thousands of people. People here are their perceptions, the political perceptions are very distorted. I think that what is considered the radical right in Europe is sort of mainstream here, and what is radical right here is like extreme crazy ass rednecks sitting in a basement somewhere everywhere else around the world. So being left wing, I'm not that radical, I must say. I'm not an anarchist or anything like that. I don't think we need to destroy everything. I just think that the Zionist regime is an oppressive, racist regime that needs to collapse as soon as possible. And it makes me, I guess, a small minority here in this extreme.
According to the new definition or recognized definition, that means you might be anti-Semitic
Yeah,
if you
obviously.
criticize Israel.
Yeah, for saying that Israel is an illegal entity, for saying that Israel is a racist regime. I'm defined as a not anti-Semitic because I'm Jewish, so it gives me. The latest updated IRHA definition of what is anti-Semitism is like another tool by the Zionist propaganda to prevent rightful criticism against its actions. I think that today I can safely say that the greatest source of anti-Semitism and the greatest threat to Jewish lives around the world is the Zionist regime. It is the greatest cause of any mishaps that happen to Jews anywhere. And here also in the place that was supposed to be a safe haven for Jews is probably the most dangerous place for Jews. It creates hatred against Jews, and also happily claims, like the Zionist propagandists claim, that every Jew is Zionist in his heart, which I'm not, and I think that it is in itself anti-Semitic to claim that, but it's like semi-formal Israeli agenda that's saying that we represent all Jews and all Jews represent us. So yeah, the Zionist propaganda machine is very active in distorting what is anti-Semitism and in creating anti-Semitism. In fact, when you look at what happens on the ground.
Oh, and what is happening on the ground? What's happening in Jenin? Tell us.
Today is another very bloody day. Since early morning, large amounts of Zionist army forces have invaded the Jenin refugee camp, which is a very populated and poor area. They're using huge amounts of ammunition. They're bombing from the air. Not remember the exact numbers but they're using drones and gunships and heavy vehicles. I'm not sure if tanks, but they're like this, armored tractors that are destroying the streets of Jenin. So far, there were confirmed 8 Palestinian casualties, and I don't know how many dozens of wounded, but I'm quite convinced that the number is going to continue rising. It is the latest. Only 2 weeks ago, there was another incursion into Jenin with 7 Palestinians killed, including a 14-year-old girl that was in her balcony and was shot in the head by a Zionist sniper. So far, I don't know who are the ones that were killed, but some of them might be Palestinians who are resisting the attack against the city.
For viewers that are outside of Israel, outside the Middle East, in South Asia, give us a brief summary of what happened. How has it been going on? I know it's
it's a bit big. Yeah, what's happening? Since when?
You were talking about 67, the occupation, and now it's moving towards a one-state solution, so to speak.
I think that the Israeli regime, the Zionist claim that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. I think that it was a democracy on paper for about 6 months between the end of 1966 and 1967, when the regime conquered the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, which is part of the West Bank, and the Golan Heights. And with it, millions of Palestinians who since then are living under a very harsh dictatorship that became harsher as time went by. In the past, I think that, I don't know, I was born in 81, but since then there was several rounds of confrontations between Palestinians trying to resist their oppression and occupation. But things didn't change much. During that time, the Zionist regime built settlements all over the West Bank, also in Gaza, but then they evacuated the few settlements in Gaza. But in the West Bank, the settlements are only growing and growing. They are talking about 500,000 Israelis living in the West Bank, between and above Palestinians. Most of them are in separate settlements, but they are like spread all over the territory. In the past, there were hopes that the conflict can be solved with what has been called the two-state solution. me as being a radical left-wing, I was always against it because I thought it was not the right way. I think this country is too small to be divided, and there is no reason for us to build walls between us and our neighbors. But for many years, it was considered like a mainstream goal of average left-wingers and the international community to push both sides to some sort of a settlement and agreeing to divide the country again. As the violence continued and the settlements continued, and Jerusalem is supposed to be the capital of both states, so-called states, was the Zionist building in the eastern side expanded. It still seems less and less likely that if there was ever hope for a division, for it to succeed. And now I think that more and more people are beginning to understand that we are not only that we are the only solution to the conflict is one state, that we are already actually living in one state, one regime, but it's one regime that is extremely undemocratic. I think that calling it apartheid will be to diminish how severe it is. Like you have, I think that I can safely say that this regime is the most discriminatory regime existing today. You've got so many different types of populations with different sets of rights and different sets of obligations and living under the same regime. The Palestinians in Gaza, 2.5 million people are living in just open prison, cannot leave. The Israelis control every piece of food that enters Gaza's mouth. In fact, you can, if you were born in Gaza, you don't exist until the Israelis acknowledge you and put you in the registry. In the West Bank, you've got different Palestinians living in different conditions and with different rights. Some are living in places controlled militarily by the Palestinian Authority, which means they have some sort of an autonomy. Some are living in places the Palestinian Authority have civilian authority, but not a security authority, which doesn't mean anything because the Israeli Zionist army is everywhere anyway. And some are living in places that are fully controlled by the Israelis. And also inside the Green Line, it's in so-called official Israel. Also, you've got like different Palestinians with different sets of rights. This is the regime. This is what it is. The only thing that's left now is to fight for making it democratic.
Well, let me play the devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Let me play the devil's advocate for a second. Israel says that it is a democratic country, that it is a democratic country which is trying to preserve a Jewish identity because of what the Jews have suffered throughout history, including the Holocaust, when over 6 million Jews were killed by the Nazis across Europe, and that the creation of Israel was a chance at a new start. And that all of this area, including the occupied areas, have a 4,000-year presence of Jews. They call it Judea and Samaria. They don't call it occupied territories. And they say that these Palestinians living in these areas are in fact Arabs. They're Jordanians, and they should go back to Jordan.
They were born here. Their parents were born here, and the grandparents
Yeah,
were
but
born
they
here.
are Arabs and not Palestinians.
Okay,
There's nothing like Palestine.
My great-grandfather was also born here, and he was Palestinian. He was a Jewish Palestinian. The Holocaust was probably the biggest crime in human history, but it doesn't justify continuing other crimes. It doesn't. The fact that the Jews need a safe place to be, that's true, but it doesn't mean that they can. First of all, it's not safe. I'm not feeling safe. I was inside a bus that exploded. I don't feel safe here. Nobody is safe here. And the fact that you want to have a safe place doesn't mean that you can destroy someone else's home for it. There is a way of making it a safe place for everybody. It is to make it democratic. The only the least worst type of regime that we know is democracy, and it's working in creating de-escalating situations. The fact that people have the same rights can hopefully lower the tensions. there is no democracy here. There is democracy for Jews only. There is democracy for less than half the population. Democracy for less than half of the population is not a democracy. South Africa was a democracy for whites. It wasn't a democracy. There is no modern definition of democracy which can characterize the regime that we are living here in as a democracy. It can be a democracy and it can be a safe place for Jews and Palestinians as long as the Jews will, the Zionists will agree to let go of their privileges and let go of the oppressive regime that is not allowing Palestinians any hope for a better future, and start building a future together instead of killing and oppressing and jailing and kidnapping and humiliating daily millions of people.
You're saying humiliating, killing Palestinians. You say you don't feel safe, but the Americans have a different view. And the Arabs, it seems, especially in the UAE and Bahrain, have a different view as well. You've got the Abraham Accords. Well, the regimes.
The regimes. I have a group of corrupt regimes that they are, for many years, those corrupt monarchs oppressing their own populations were using the Palestinian cause because they thought that it will make the regime more stable. Now that they reached a different conclusion, that they understood that it's easier to buy Zionist cyber tools to oppress the population more efficiently, then they are trying to, okay, let's make peace with the Zionists, and then we can buy very sophisticated tools of keeping us in power. The fact that it doesn't mean that the people in the Emirates or the people in Jordan or the people anywhere, Israel has a peace treaty with Egypt for the past 40 years. That still doesn't mean that the Egyptians are supporting Israel. Most of the Egyptians resist Israel, rightly so, by the way, for its actions, for the fact that they are still occupying Palestine, still oppressing Palestinians daily. The fact that the Americans are enjoying having a, I wouldn't say a puppet regime, but like sort of a semi-colony here in the Middle East that allows them to have influence over the area, doesn't mean that it's right or just. The fact that now outgoing U.S. ambassador here just proudly published a video on Twitter with him and the Zionist terror army soldiers talking about how he's proud of them, doesn't mean that their actions, they're not part of the state terror organization.
In his defense, he said Shabbat Shalom. Basically.
Yeah, he said Shabbat Shalom with a group of soldiers behind him. Yeah, but those soldiers are part of a terrorist organization. The Zionist army is a terrorist organization. It is state-funded, state-supported terror that is terrorizing millions of people daily. That's what it is. They are killing children. A few weeks ago, the Palestinian two-year-old Palestinian was shot in the head by a Zionist sniper. That wasn't the army's investigation even ruled that he didn't do anything wrong, because there was another soldier there that was shooting in the air. He thought he was shooting, I don't know, but he was a sniper and using very sophisticated equipment to shoot a 2-year-old toddler in the head and killing him. This is what the Zionist army is doing. And if you are part of a terrorist organization, you are a terrorist. And if you are a U.S. ambassador supporting this type of terrorism, then the U.S. is supporting terrorism. It's not new. The U.S. has been supporting terrorism in different places around the world. But it's like, I think, the most obvious example today.
In Jenin.
In Jenin, in Al-Bire, there was also one Palestinian killed today. 2 days ago it was somewhere else. Tomorrow it will be somewhere else. It's also happening inside Israel when they are not killing them directly. Since the beginning of the year, the current regime is also completely disregarding any attempt to prevent crime inside the Palestinian society. Inside Israel, the ones with citizenship, the number of murders here of Palestinians killing each other has risen to, I think, all-time high. I know that it's all-time high. The society is disenfranchised, is dismantled, and there's also there is an influx of crime that the Zionists are importing from the West Bank to the Palestinian populations here in Israel. In fact, most crime organizations, like there have been terrible problem with crime organizations in the Palestinian society inside Israel, most of them are collaborators of the Israeli security apparatus that were criminals in the West Bank that were apprehended, and then they collaborated with the regime so they won't go to jail. And when they finished giving up all their secrets and giving up all the tips of where the armed resistance is, then the Israelis took them and put them in the Palestinian cities inside Israel, and giving the backbone for what is like the crime issues of the Palestinian society here in Israel, at which more than 100 Palestinians were murdered since the beginning of the year. So yeah, the regime is using terror not only against Palestinians in the West Bank or in Gaza, using terror against Palestinians.
So you said over 100 Palestinians killed. Israelis have also been killed, although not as much.
I'm not saying about the Palestinians killed by the Israelis. I'm saying Palestinians killed as part of crime murders inside Israel by other criminals. But this crime issue is also was created by the Zionist regime when they are actually taking criminals from the West Bank, using them, extorting them for information, and then inserting them and sending them to live in the Palestinian towns inside Israel. And other than that, more than 150 Palestinians were killed since the beginning of the year by the Zionist army itself. Yes, and also the number of Israelis killed since the beginning of the year is rising. I don't remember the exact number.
You have a far right, you have a government led by Benjamin Netanyahu. You've got far right radical settler leaders like Itamar Ben-Gvir, like Bezalel Smotrich, who are leading critical security infrastructures now. Where is this heading? What are we looking at?
Down. It's going to deteriorate. Things are not expected to improve anytime soon. That's true. I don't see how there's no good way for it to end. Hopefully, the world will understand that this regime is not sustainable, and will apply more and more pressure again for changing the reality here.
Hopefully, are you sure? Will the world understand very quickly?
I'm saying it quickly. It can take years and years. 5 years ago, I said it will take 20 years, which means I have 15 more years to go. I don't know. It seems the deterioration is accelerating. 3 years ago, if you would tell someone that Ben-Gvir will be in charge of the Israeli police, Ben-Gvir was a suspect of so many different crimes, including support of terrorism and more. And now he is he's like the minister in charge of the police. I think 3 years ago people would say you're joking. There's no chance it will happen. And now he is there in charge. And Netanyahu,
who are these people? Very quickly for our viewers, who is Itamar Ben-Gvir? His mother's from as an Iraqi Kurdish origin, they say. He's a settler. He's part of the Kahanist movement. Very briefly, tell our viewers about this Kahanist movement and Ben-Gvir, and who are these people?
Itamar Ben-Gvir was his first call to fame is 15 minutes of fame. It was during the Oslo Accords, when there was huge protests against the Israeli government for talking about peace with Palestinians. Before the Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was murdered, Ben-Gvir was part of a mob that attacked the Prime Minister's car, and he was filmed with the symbol of the car that he was able to break, and he was, I think, 17 or 19 back then. Since then, he was considered one of the followers of Meir Kahana, who is, I think, how can I define him? He's like the ideological leader or the creator of the radical right-wing religious, ultra-racist, ultra-nationalist movement that was for many years defined, I think maybe still is defined by the US as a terrorist organization, and was also for many years defined in Israel as a terrorist organization. Kahana himself was killed by Palestinians in the US late 80s, or beginning of the 90s. Since then, Ben-Gvir tried to distance himself from this movement, but not really from the ideology behind it. I think that's how to. I think to sum it up, like I think it used to be like in the fringes of the Israeli society, and also preyed on the weakest. Like they were always looking for street kids that had no home and no families, no support, and brainwashing them and using them for their hate crimes. This is where he grew up. He became a lawyer. He became a lawyer representing those radical right-wing attackers. He was representing many people who attack Palestinians. And then he became a politician, built a party. It took him a couple of years, and now Netanyahu has put him in charge of a lot of people with guns. Let's put it this way. We can be even more.
Asaf, thank you so much for your time. It's an honor to have you. And I know you don't do this usually for just anyone. So I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and speaking to our viewers and telling us what it is like from the ground. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, there you have it. असाफ रुनैल हमें बता रहे थे, सहाफ़ी रह चुके हैं इज़राइल के अंदर, बड़ी गहराई से, बड़ी करीबी से इन्होंने देखा है वहाँ पे क्या कुछ हो रहा है इज़राइल फ़लस्तीन के अंदर जो ऑक्यूपाइड टेरिटरीज़ हैं। और अपने कमेंट सजेशंस आप हमें भेजते रहें और इंशाल्लाह हम आपके लिए और ऐसे मौज़ूआत के ऊपर डिस्कशंस लेके आएंगे और इस इशू को जो इज़राइल फ़लस्तीन में जो जेनिन में हो रहा है उसको हम बड़ी गहराई से फॉलो करेंगे। अपना ख्याल रखें।